welcome to this discussion. I hope I can hold it in some way that it doesn't make these breathing noises all the time. Originally, somewhere in, I think in November, I wrote a little comment that I want to give a rant talk about some things at Ansible that are really annoying, and or especially to me, but also that I see are causing problems in other places. And then at some point someone changes to the discussion between Nitz and me, and so now we have this discussion. I'm not really sure how we will do this, but I guess we'll improvise a bit.
Yes, and.
Yes, and. No. Your problem. Okay, so one of the things I think is impacting most people, and it's probably one of the worst things, is like support for Python versions. Especially because it implies also support for old operating systems. Like if you are managing RHEL 8 or Rocky 8 or Alma 8 or whatever system, or like an older Debian LTS version, then you might find out that the latest Ansible Core versions don't really allow you to use them anymore or to administer them anymore, especially if you want to install packages, because they're requiring bindings for the package managers. Actually, I just heard that for apt maybe there are now bindings also for other Python versions, but at least for RHEL and I guess also for Rocky and so on. There you just have Python bindings for the system Python, which is I think 3.6, which hasn't been supported by Ansible Core since 2017. So you basically have to use Ansible Core 2.16, which is already a couple of years old and also is missing a lot of features. Also cool features. Not everyone may like all of them, but that's another topic. So yeah, that was one of my big topics, but now from the comments I heard earlier today and also from what Nitz just told to me, it looks like something will be done about that, maybe. And maybe, Nitz, can you tell what's currently planned?
Yep. Yeah. So I've heard from this is a common theme we've heard for a long time, and it's like we know this is a problem, and so it's been we've tried lots of different little tricks to work around this, and the one we keep hoping would happen was that that RHEL and some other teams would just package the bindings for multiple versions of Python, not just the system Python, because Ansible Core itself doesn't care. We don't care about RHEL versions or anything else. It's like whatever you're running the controller on and whatever target you're managing. Do we have a supported Python version on there? Great, we're in business. But there are some special important things there with caveats there with those things like libdnf is the biggest one that if you want to do package management on RHEL using the DNF module, the package action, any of those things, you have to have libdnf bindings on the target that work. And for technical reasons beyond, I guess the short answer for the reason they don't do this is, I don't know if you've ever looked at the way that those things are built, but unlike normal kind of Python packages, they're all generated swig bindings for Python, Ruby, Perl. They have a whole bunch of, so libdnf, libsclinux, firewalld, a handful of these things. There isn't just something that you can go run that will easily cough up a Python binding for these things. They're built monolithically. So when the entire RPM package for DNF is built, or for SELinux or some of these other things, all of these other bindings are built along with it. They're very tightly coupled. Like there aren't a lot of ABI guarantees between the generated Python extension binding and the actual libdnf. So if there's a change made to that thing and the binding isn't updated, then it's going to segfault when you go try to use it, which nobody wants that either. So and just the way they do this, it's not easy. Those spec files, they build one, they target one version of Python. So it's possible to make it target another version and do these things. it takes a few minutes to figure it out, but especially even with libdnf5, they cleaned up the builds, so it's easier to do this, but still it would be really dangerous if we were actually publishing extension bindings for these things ourselves, because there's no, without that ABI guarantee, if there's some CVE or some, there's some update to libdnf and the binding doesn't match exactly, then when you go to use it, seg fault. So that's definitely bad. So the RHEL team is also obviously not really keen to take on these the management of those problems too. Though I've heard that SUSE has started doing it, so for libdnf for their shipped versions of it, and Zipper and some other things. So, but anyway, that discussion really, like every time, it always comes down to the easy solution from our perspective is not going to happen. So. In Ansible Core 221, we're trying something a little different. The PR is out there already. Civil's been working on it. Matt Clay kind of suggested a little twist on something that I suggested a while back that made it even simpler. But basically what ended up happening is Civil built a really tiny C-types wrapper around the parts of libdnf that we need to talk to, and stuck that into the DNF package, or sorry, into the Ansible DNF module. We have another, it's just another Python file in there that does this and works against the versions of libdnf that we need it to. So I don't know if this is going to work well for everything else, but it seems to work well enough for libdnf. So we're able now to say, you can use libdnf from any supported target Python version, and I don't remember how far back he went with it, if he went back to RHEL 7, but I know it works on, it's been working on 8, 9, 10, and the various CentOS streams and Fedoras that go along with those. So we're gonna ship that as kind of the canary in the coal mine for 221 and see if that works. And if that does, we put a few new capabilities into the module builder and some other things to support this, so that we can kind of conditionally add resource type things like that are only there if they're needed. So if that whole thing works out well in 221, we'll probably document that process and harden it a little more, so that other collection maintainers that have dependencies like this, you can go and plug that in. So Ansible POSIX has a few of these. They've got the Firewall D and SE Linux ones. And if this pattern kind of works well, we'll document that stuff and make that public. And core team is probably not going to take on building those things, but at least that there is a supported way to do this now. So the ideal thing would be that for those that are interested from the product perspective and the paying customer perspective, I think the ideal would be that for the content that needs it, for all the things like RHEL system roles and everything else, we can get those things built and shipped in there, and all of that content will just start working. So you still would have to install a Python version that's new enough on the target to do it. So we wouldn't be actually using Python 3.6. We would be using, so you'd still have to have a supported Python version available on that target. But yes.
So Ansible does the Python interpreter discovery.
Yes.
Will it be able to handle this particular case?
Yes. Oh yeah, sorry. The question was if interpreter discovery would be able to assist in this particular case, and yes, and in fact it sort of eliminates the need for interpreter discovery in this particular case, because you don't care what the Python version is as long as it's something that we support. So the interpreter discovery, the default list takes whatever the newest Python version we support and then starts walking backwards. So it's basically going to be whatever the newest supported Python version that you've got on the target, that's what we're going to use.
Cool.
I think that's a reasonably sane, behavior for the things that don't have other requirements. And if you've got something more specific, obviously you can override the Python interpreter to force it to use whatever you need. At least, we should find something that can work. So yeah. Yes.
until when is it expected that the certified collection at least will then be able to support that one? That would be with GA of 221 or a year later?
TBD. Yeah. So the question was if we like when is this going to be supported basically for either whether it's certified content or at least the things that are like system roles and all of those kinds of things. TBD. Most of that I think is over my head. It's it's someone else's. But for those of you on the customer side, talk to your TAM or your product manager and tell them that you want this, and they'll I think that those discussions are happening basically like who's gonna take the work to do the pieces on the other parts of the content. But yeah, so core team, we figured out a pattern for it. We've shipped the things for core in 221. If there are other things, though, that work can probably start happening as soon as we merge the stuff here in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, it's just they gotta find somebody to do the work. So yeah. Is there any other questions or discussion about that particular problem? Yes, in the back.
Not discussion, but could someone link the open virtual class in the Hacker Meeting?
Someone actually, I don't know, maybe Felix can find it.
I can try to.
It's just look for one that's on core civil. I think it's the newest one that's open. So there's
search for relate issues.
Support core
yeah, the question was just if we could
against
link that to HackMD, link the open PR for the DNF wrapper binding thing. So Felix is going to take care of that. So yeah, any other questions or discussion about that? Yeah.
Does it fix the problem that Ansible don't work with Red Hat 8? And
Sorry, I missed the last half of that of the question. Like, does it fix the problem that?
Yes, it will.
Ansible is not working with
RHEL 8.
Red Hat 8 because they use Python in version.
So the question was if it
6.
does it fix the problem that if Ansible Core doesn't support the Python version. Yes, this is basically the fix for or at least this is the pattern that can be used by there's other work to be done by collection authors to make this functional, but like core team's trying out a pattern for the place where we have this problem, which is the DNF module, and if this is successful and deemed workable by users, then yes, then there will be a pattern in place for other collection authors that have to write modules that need to talk to these system bindings to make those things Python independent or Python version independent. Then again, the only requirement is that the target still has to have a new enough Python that core can talk to it. But that's always been the case for the entire lifetime of Ansible, and that's a much easier requirement to deal with. It just means there's some extra work for some of those other collection maintainers to build their binding replacement, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Going once, going twice? Okay.
Good.
I'll hand it back to Felix for his next item. He's got quite a list over here. That's good.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for that. I mean, it's still kind of annoying that you might have to use some raw tasks first to make sure that you actually have a new enough Python version. But at least I think for most users this will be great if this works, because it will make it a lot easier. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the biggest points. I'm glad to hear that there's actually work being done on that. Another thing, or another big topic which has been quite annoying is going back to data tagging. This also has been mentioned a bit in the last days. I mean, one big problem seems to have been that especially data tagging has been, it has been a very big change with data tagging. In case you don't know this term, it basically means the changes which ended up in 2.19, which changed how the trust model worked, which caused which disallowed certain certain Boolean expressions, they now have to return a proper Boolean, like something Booleanish or true-ish or false-ish is no longer allowed and rejected by default. And a lot of other changes related to templating. These are basically all go under the topic of data tagging, because they all were made because data tagging was added. And I personally think this is a great I mean, of course there have been some things which didn't work well, but in general I think this is a really good thing, because especially now it makes templating more predictable. So especially for all people who start using Ansible, this will be great, because before it was always a problem that you wrote something as you had a small template somewhere, some expression, and then you weren't really sure what type it is until you tested. And then you change a little thing and suddenly the type changes because of some mysterious reason. Because there's something was suddenly interpreted as a data structure and sometimes not, depending on, well, if you look in the code you can figure it out, but I mean it's not really great for users. And this doesn't really happen anymore, which of course breaks some existing code, which relies on these funny things happening. But I think in general it's better. But that's not what I really want to talk about. But one big problem seemed to be that, I mean, this is a really huge feature, and from my point of view, one of the biggest changes or breaking changes in Ansible since probably the change from 1 to 2 or something like that. And it seemed like it wasn't really tested that well. I mean, there has been a lot of testing happening, but I mean, there were also a lot of things, especially in the ecosystem, especially like some Red Hat maintained collections, which simply broke or didn't work anymore. Even though there has been a long talk about testing it against pre-releases. I mean, some of the bugs even had been reported by members of the community like months before the actual release of 2.19 happened. But just, well, nothing happened about that until it was released, and then people figured out, oh, it doesn't work, so now we have to do something. And oh, in some of the cases, like Ansible Netcommon, it turned out that it actually requires changes in core. And I mean, if core is already released, it's basically too late to make changes in core. And then basically, it, like also for the Ansible community package, we had to wait until the next core release happened to include some fixes so that Ansible Netcommon can actually be made working again. Which is, well, from the community point of view, it's really horrible how this went. And yeah, I'm really wondering, I mean, this is, I guess, a lot of internals in Red Hat going on there. I'm really wondering why it is so problematic or hard to get better testing from inside of Red Hat for new stuff in Ansible Core. Especially if they are so big changes. I mean, they didn't come by surprise. They have been announced some time in advance. There have been like calls to test things, and still nothing happened. I'm not really sure how much you can tell about it, but I just wanted
to take that.
If you want, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that might be.
You're aware of, I think you know most everything I do, so.
I mean, let me be direct. Red Hat, Ansible Engineering, we messed up, right? I mean, there's no way around that, right? The fact that we, Core, were working on updating updating templating. We've communicated this very clearly. And the community's always got really involved. Like, was it 56 people, I think, had got involved and talked with the thing. We just messed up. We just didn't track the work properly. We looked at the individual collections and done some work there, but we didn't do anything there. That's done. What I'm going to do with my manager hand is I'm going to work with some of the networking teams to get them working a little bit more upstream and to go and put in some help, monitoring of issues and different things we can work there. And just networking more generally, right? Like the old Slack instance, we're going to move that into the forum. We're going to make sure that there's one place where the discussion's happening. It was fragmented, so bits of conversations were being lost. Yeah. Can you hear me okay in the back now? Sorry if that wasn't clear before. So yeah, we've got some specific bits. We've got some meetings up for once we get back from some travels. We hope to avoid this type of issue again. And this comes back to the main the stuff that Don was talking about earlier, right? The pain of testing in places. There are different ways that we're testing. And although we're running the right, good tests, not everyone was running from the develop branch. Right? The bleeding had the unreleased, unstable version of Ansible Core, which we should be doing. So there's just gaps in some of our testing, and this is another reason. Don't let a good crisis go to waste, right? Like we've got a bit of a spotlight on here. I quite like this because I get to push my own agenda of how I think things should be done, and hopefully we can make things a bit better in the future. But this again, it's a consistency part. Hopefully that felt like an okay answer without being totally fobbed off, Felix.
Yes, yeah.
I'll say, I don't know whether the net common collection was testing against Devil. Were they not at that time?
No, and that was the
I
problem.
just checked, they definitely are now.
Cool. So we've hopefully fixed that bit. Now, whether anyone's looking at the test results, I mean that's a problem enough thing we'll look at. But well, one of the simple things we're going to do, I think, is put in copy the automation. I think Core might have this, and maybe the AWX repo for every new issue in PR to add a needs triage label on it, and then that's a simple GitHub view that the maintainer of that collection can look at and go, well, you've got one page to look at to see what you need to triage and are you paying attention. And I can monitor it to make sure people are doing their work and keeping on top of those queues. So yeah, hopefully a few bits we can do there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, one.
Okay, I just add to what Gendo mentioned. I'm reading the networking.
Do you want to put you on the spot? Yeah, and so this is Chetner, who's actually the engineering manager of networking, and is doing this brilliant job. And like I said, I accept the blame on this stuff for not following this. This is not Chetner's problem.
Also, I might want to say I'm not looking to place blame on individual persons.
No.
Because there were also some other collections, there were also some other problems, and it's just my hope that this will be better in the future if something like similar changes happen again, that this goes in a more smooth way, especially both for users and for community, and also for the people who have to package the community distribution and so on. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, it's better now? Okay, cool. So like Gendo said, yeah, we messed up. I understand that, the the collection broke down and there was a lot of, noise about it. And we tried our best to get a workaround as soon as possible. The moment we got to know, we tried to do our best with the workaround and everything. And as said, I really talked about that in my talk yesterday as well. Velocity matters when it comes to maintaining these extensive collections, and our releases are independent of Ansible Core as well. So sometimes it happens. So what we expect from community is just to highlight those to us as well, help us identify those issues, and I will try our best to triage community issues going forward. And as Gando mentioned, we'll work around to make it better for community versions as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I mean, also there were people who added actually comments that it's broken in May already, and but apparently nobody read them. So, or I don't know what exactly happened, but it's good that you talk about it and try to improve it. That's great. Yeah, something related to that is, I mean, there have been more breaking or changes, like for example, this inject facts as vars, the default that changed. And one topic there was that someone asked on the forum, why is this changed? And there hasn't been any reaction from anyone from the core team or anyone who really knows for a longer time, until there have been some comments. I think Brian Coker at some point started commenting, and then in some half sentence mentioned a reason why this could have been done. And I think a general pattern is, I mean, this might also be related to the previous topic, to the 2.19 changes. I mean, for some people who have been following this stuff, especially data tagging for a long time, for them it's kind of obvious why this is done. But I guess for many people, this changes just popped up randomly without warning and broke everything, and nobody knows why, or at least from their point of view. And okay, if you looked at the porting guide, you could of course see some explanations for it. So I think there it was not that bad. But I think a general thing is that it would be great if there would be better communication about breaking changes, especially if they affect many people. I mean, there are always some small rating changes. Something was deprecated, changed. Like some things are pretty obvious to why they are changed, but some others, like for example this one, it's far from obvious why it's changed. I mean, a lot of people who know more about how this fact injection works kind of are happy about it or can see why it would be changed, but it's still, for other people, it's like a complete surprise. This has been working like that since Ansible 1. I don't know what, long time. And now suddenly it's changing and you have like 2 years to adjust, and then Ansible core versions won't do that anymore. Well, now it won't do it by default anymore, and at some point it will actually be removed. And yeah, I don't know if it's...
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of pieces to this. I think the bigger the challenge that we have with this is still more about, I think it's mostly about the communication end of it, because for this one in particular, this was actually one of the things that data tagging was that's one of the reasons that we were using to push to do data tagging when we did it, was so that we could move forward with actually deprecating inject facts as vars, because the knob has been in there since like, I don't know, like maybe 2.5 or something. We've wanted to start doing this because it's a secure. I mean, if anybody wants to know the specifics of the security problem with it, I can explain it like maybe offline. But in any case, the inject facts as vars, it is a security problem and kind of a nasty one potentially, depending on what you're doing. So we've wanted to be able to deprecate this for a long time, but data tagging or some way of being able to tell you that you're using a variable that is going to go away was a prerequisite for that. So data tagging has been the thing we've been waiting for, to be able to actually start the deprecation clock on that thing since 2.5 or whenever it went in. So it's been a long time. But yeah, I think the bigger picture here, the bigger thing to focus on is more the communication and like how can we do a better job of explaining how and why. And for those that remember, I'm trying to remember which things we did. A few things there. There are a few error messages and deprecation warnings over the years that actually had embedded links in them that would kick you to documentation. And with all of the DocSite shuffle over the last several years, like that's been more difficult to maintain. But I personally, I was the one that put that feature in there in the first place. Which I don't even remember what we're using them for anymore. But there were a handful of places where there was a complex. Interpreter discovery was one of them. So like, yeah, the interpreter discovery thing, that was actually, I put that in there, and it was exactly for this kind of thing. It's like, hey, here's something complicated I don't want to have to explain in line in this warning or error message. It's like, oh, please read this like these 3 paragraphs of text about what this warning means. To be able to link you out to something that, like, if you don't understand what this means or why this is important, like, here's a docs page that we can link to tell you. I feel like we're missing, we've not made any new ones of that style of things since interpreter discovery, I think, just because, so this is something, where's Don? Like, it's like, this feels like one of those things, like, if we can figure out a better, like, permalink pattern or something, that we can do this sort of thing for these version specific, possibly, content warnings, and be able to embed those links back in core. I feel like that's at least a better solution for being able to tell people, like, why is this a thing and why does this matter? So I think that's part of it. There's the pre-communication of, like, this is, and the discussion of this is coming, and maybe, I think the forum is probably a good place for that. We tend to have gotten a little more insular maybe on the core team with some of these things, where we talk about it amongst ourselves and we just kind of forget that that's not happening in a public forum. Because we used to discuss this stuff in IRC all the time back. Whenever there was something like this, we would, the regular core things, when there were stuff like that coming, we would try to do this stuff in IRC so that the discussion was open. If you were hanging around and looking in the right place, you could see the discussion and participate and say, like, hey, I think this is a bad idea, or maybe if you thought of this. I feel like, since we've moved, the IRC stuff has kind of mostly gone away, and the matrix stuff, we've stopped doing those kind of office hours style things, because people weren't participating in them, and so we kind of just, it got to a point where it was just crickets every day, and so we're like, okay, well, I guess, but I feel like maybe there's probably something that we could do there that would be better. I don't know what it is, short of like opening up the core team Slack to everybody, but but you know, we, especially when that IRC stuff was pretty regularly happening and people really engaged with it, we tried to if there was any kind of important discussion like that, we were having that, if at least mirroring and summarizing and giving people an opportunity to comment on those things before they were sort of a foregone conclusion. And I don't feel like we have a good venue for that anymore. And so if people have ideas or, you know, suggestions about that, the forum might be a fine place to do it. I think that just the asynchronous nature of it, I think, is a lot better than, you know, oh, get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go jump into an IRC meeting and you know, get your pitchfork out for us. So maybe that is the or at least certainly a way to try. And so I will commit to that, and I'll try to hold the core team a little more accountable for that as well. Just to say, you know, hey, when we're starting to do things like this before, you know, either before the PR shows up or certainly before it gets merged, like let's any of these things like this that are going to affect large swaths of people, like let's make sure that we've got a place to discuss this stuff as it's evolving. Because we're all flying low on things, you know, we've got deadlines to get these things into, and so a lot of times some of us in particular are you know, very we're on the very end of the deadlines usually, so we're past them. So but yeah, so I don't know, any other thoughts on that before we move on to the next one? I guess I'll take that though as a you know, some good feedback that the core team could do a better job of just publicizing some of these things before it's a foregone conclusion, giving more opportunity for alternative viewpoints and you know, what do you thought about this kinds of things?
I also have some more comments on that actually.
Good.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Well, one thing I think doing this on the forum will be really great. I mean, I tried to attend these IRC meetings in the past. Originally, they were happening, I think, once or twice per week even.
Yeah, and we would switch.
And then at some point it was switched, and then it was only once per month, and then it was happening at the time where I usually couldn't come, and then they went away, basically. It was really, I mean, it was nice when this happened in the open, but then it vanished. So doing it on the forum would be great. But another thing I want to mention is that this is not just about Ansible Core, but there are also collections deprecating things, and I guess I also did this in the past, where I probably never really mentioned why something is deprecated or then broken at some point or removed, because it was clear to me and it was clear to everyone else involved, but probably not to users. So I think it's probably in general a good idea also for collection maintainers or contributors to, like, if you deprecate something, to make sure that you put more information into the issues or the pull requests, and that you link to these pull issues and pull requests, both from the porting guide, like if you're making in your changelog, if you have like the deprecated features entries that you link to the issue and or the pull request where there is some more information in it. And I think it's probably also a good idea to do this actually from the deprecation message, so that the user who runs Ansible Playbook on something and suddenly gets a deprecation message, that they directly have a link where they can find more information about why this is actually deprecated, instead of having to write like this a long text for every deprecation message, which nobody wants to read and isn't helpful. I guess, are there more thoughts on that from anyone else, or does it sound like a good idea? Or
yeah, sounds good.
I maybe show up with your hand if you have seen like a deprecation warning where you've really been wondering, so why is this deprecated? I have no idea. And yeah, I think probably most of or many of you did. And yeah, I think we should all be better with that, because I've also been doing it wrong, I guess, in a few places, or probably some more. So yeah, you have something.
Maybe I think a good thing would be to do architecture decision records in the repository as like in addition to why is the collection in the state it is right now, why are there certain decisions have been made in the past, so that it would also, you could link to this when something replicates, for instance in a pull request, but it's not lost in an issue somewhere. And if somebody would like to contribute to the collection, you can easily read through this and understand why things are the way they are at the moment.
Yeah, that's also a good point. I mean, the point was that architectural decision, or I forgot the exact term, that these are also recorded, that there's some information in the issue or also in the pull request, or at least linked to the right place, where there's some information about how the situation got as it is now and why this needs to change, and maybe also what the change exactly is. So that if someone later wants to check or to go through and figure out what happened, that they have this good documentation or like a good place where they can see, like, without having to read through 100 discussions spread out over potentially multiple different sources, that they can really see why this was changed and what happened and why this originally was not as it was supposed to be.
So I actually, that kind of got me thinking in a couple of different directions, that last comment about just using an ADR, an architecture decision record for that. So I'm actually curious from the people in this room anyway, so I think most of you at some point you've probably seen the interpreter discovery message with the link in it. Okay, so that links to a docs page, and the docs page thing has always been problematic a little bit for that because of it's things moving around. And so what I'm wondering there is if we did have what I would like to do here, what I would like to see from this, the outcome of this one is that we have kind of one way to do this, that works for collections, that works for community, that works for core, that works for all of these things. And so my question to the room here would be, my question to the room here really is, would you rather see a link to whether it's a little markdown file or something in a repo, or would you rather see it to a finished docs page? Is the repo good enough, I guess, is the question, because that is a whole lot easier than linking to a rendered docs page that has all of these things. And I really, that's always been a challenge. That's why we've tried. That's what the problem that we've run into over and over again with this is that the docs, the docs side of it is tricky, because it's you've got core docs, you've got the Ansible community package docs, you've got downstream docs. What do we link to? So if it were if it's just kicking you back into a repo that's got this thing where that change was made, that's kind of easier, but it's also not as nice maybe for an end user. So I don't know.
I have strong opinions on this.
Okay.
I think that we should have a subdomain that is only doing redirects, and the redirects are managed in a Git repo, basically as a code, and everyone can do a PR so that basically it can have a new redirect, and for every error you would have a unique link, and then that link could move over time to different things, so that basically you have a stable link within the Ansible application, but at the same time that link is always up to date, because obviously you can move it.
So let me repeat that for so the one suggestion was if we've got a subdomain or something where you can link to whether it's some kind of errata things or just these little permalinks documents of some kind TBD that would be kind of shared for all of these things, and that maybe the technology can change, but the entry point, the front door stays the same, and then we don't really care what.
Yeah, and that would be only doing redirects.
Okay, yeah, and that thing would only be doing redirects. So yeah, that seems like a way to do it. If you haven't seen the stuff that was happening, and Don probably knows the doc site stuff. For a long time, we really don't like breaking links, and so the doc site had this just god awful HT access, the the redirection stuff that was going on in there was not HD access, but there was some really, really awful like multi-layers as the doc site kind of evolved over the years, trying to keep things going, and it just got to the point where it was circular, it was slow, we couldn't do anything dynamic with it, and I think bankruptcy was eventually declared on it. And so what I want to make sure is if we come up with something here, that we have something that's like, it's good enough to meet the needs of like both core team and other, you know, Ansible and Red Hat product teams things, but also that community and collections should be able to use this exact same mechanism to do all of these things. So yeah.
Yeah, about the idea of having it just in a markdown in the repo. I personally think that would be even a worse idea than linking to an issue, because the markdown in the repo could also just disappear at some point. Somebody, at some version, it's just no longer there. And it would be really hard to find with other means than the link. If it's in a doc, then you can tag it with deprecation warning, and it would be findable in the search, and files in a repo are not really
true. Yeah. Okay. So the comment there was that, you know, if it is just kind of a markdown file or something in a repo, it can disappear, and then it's also not particularly very searchable, you know, or easily maybe linked in with the rest of the doc stuff. So okay. Yeah. Actually, it's got a little. Oh yeah. Right.
I would argue why not both, because the thing is, not every collection is in the community package. So if you have a collection that has a lot of traction and maybe moves to the community package at some point, and you don't have this information in the repo or somewhere else, just render the markdown in the repo. When you get lost, the information get lost, but you will figure that out, I think.
Yeah, so there was just more comments about the collections moving around, and, you know, what if it's not part of the community collection or becomes like, yeah. And this is why this is complicated. Okay.
Also a link to a Git repo, even though it could be GitHub, for instance, it's not something that you can assume to be stable over the course of 10 years, because who knows what will happen in 10 years to GitHub, and maybe the Ansible community will move somewhere else. So then you need to have something that is on a domain that you control, but at the same time that also arrives directly to the resource the person is looking for.
Yeah. So more the comment was basically that more, just kind of more ammunition, more that we just having links to Git repos directly is probably not a great idea, because, like, you know, GitHub could go away tomorrow. It would probably be good to have whatever this is be behind some kind of facade that's on our subdomain that we own, and that we can if we need to adjust to changes over time, that we have at least the ability to do so.
I was just going to say, so that redirect strategy could be good. And if, you know, as mentioned, like if the community suddenly, you know, for some reason, whatever, did move away to some other, like, SourceForge or something, then it wouldn't matter. Like the redirect would just take you to the new location, and it would just be updated by the community over time.
As long as it's not the same redirection mechanism that we used in the doc site before. So I don't know, how big did that was like a multi-megabyte file, right? I mean, it was just nuts and completely unmaintainable after a while. So, yeah, you're gonna.
So I think there's two parts to this. I think there's where do we document the reference material? Well, one thing we saw that worked really well during the templating changes in 2019 is having a place where folks can go and discuss and get feedback also helps. And then we take bits of feedback and we improve the doc. So I think maybe for these new pages we're going to create, we should actually have a link back to a dedicated forum post, or at least a tag in the forum, somewhere where we're guiding people to the right place to us. But I really like the idea of, I mean, Microsoft do is go.microsoft.com/number. I think that's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, Microsoft does this sometimes and they declare bankruptcy every once in a while and break all that stuff. You're like, oh, we're not going to break it. We're not. Oh, it's all broken. So at least that linking back to the possibility of maybe linking back to any forum discussions that happened before this thing was made, or during and after the decision, and that part's kind of living discussion, but at least the, like, okay, for what we shipped and what we want to tell people when they encounter this, that there is kind of a fixed thing sitting around somewhere. That, yeah.
Yeah, I just brought a counterpoint to a file in repo, but now I don't know how structured you meant it in the first place, but I had the idea it could also be in the repo, maybe in a pretty standardized way. So we say we have in the meta directory or something like an adr.md that has a standard and that everyone should follow, and that's kind of a standardized way. And you could also render that in the docs, but it would live in the repo, and it would also survive moving the repo to other sites or to the community collection. Or
Yeah. So basically, the comment was that, you know, maybe if this were a standardized thing, you know, that if there were a standard place that collections should put these things, that and a standardish way to represent them, that they could be rendered in doc sites, but then also, you know, that any kind of redirection facility or dynamic thing could do that if we kind of agreed on a way to do this, and just remember that. So yeah. Anyway, Felix has something.
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea, but also there's something we have to think about, that is, if we make this too complicated for collection maintainers, they might not do it at all. So we have to make sure that if we do something, especially try to standardize it, that it should be quite easy for people to use. Otherwise, it probably won't be used, and that's probably worse than that's not better than the current situation.
I would just add to that I think at least starting with what you're talking about there, with the kind of doing it in the collection, I think that's kind of table stakes, right? We have to do that, and how we choose to access and surface that stuff to make it, you know, both in core, like I want to be able to give an URL to one of these things. Like I have to figure out that's where we might need something that's kind of able to send you to one of those things, or to be able to pull from those things. But ultimately, there still needs to be, I think the source of truth for all this stuff needs to be in the repo, and not probably in a shared repo, because that brings the whole thing of like, well, who gets to contribute to that repo, and somebody has to manage that now. And so, you know, maybe there's some inheritance of some of those things, like, okay, if you're in the community collection, like your stuff automatically is able to be redirected through that. I don't know, we have to figure that out. But what I definitely don't want to do is come up with some other thing that's like people are having to get, you know, request access, or that there's PRs to this giant shared repo for every collection under the sun. That seems like not the way to go. Like, we should be able to do this in a way that's a little more kind of democratic for for everyone to be able to get their stuff in there and use these kind of standard patterns without having to have it blessed by someone else. Yeah.
How much more? I know Felix has got a long list, but we're sort of getting towards the time to. But I don't know if you've got one you want to finish on, or.
I definitely don't want to finish the whole list, because then we will still sit here probably
we've
tomorrow.
We've got time this afternoon, so.
No, it's I mean, one thing actually, which was nice, because I think you mentioned yesterday at some point, or maybe the day before even, that there's something in the works for that. One thing that has been bothering me for a longer time, and I think also other people, because I remember reading things about that, like even on the mailing list. They have been disabled for some time now, probably long before, like the 210 collection split. Namely about warnings and deprecation warnings, and being able to disable specific ones, or like even like making them errors, but only some of them, because usually, I mean, if you have ever like used a C++ compiler or C compiler, you know that there's this flag W all, which basically shows you all warnings. Then there's warnings as errors, which many people enable to make sure that every warning results in an error and makes compilation fail. But then there are also some cases where warnings are not really helpful, because you know that the compiler tries to warn you about something, but you know that it doesn't apply here, so you locally disable it, like also for no QA things and for linters and so on. I mean, you've seen things like that. And being able to have better control about warnings and deprecation warnings in Ansible would be really great. But then I think you mentioned that something will be happening soon. So.
Yeah. So I'll talk about that just a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things that happened in 2.19 was we standardized a bunch of the internal error and warning controls in Ansible Core. So like I mentioned yesterday that we had thrown away like hundreds of individually handcrafted error handling things that and just tried to standardize a bunch of that stuff on a small handful of things. And during that process, we started talking internally on the core team about this, about, hey, warning control sucks, right? We've had this problem, we've tried a bunch of different things over the years. People have wanted us to move to standard library logging things and use those for filtering, and we weren't real hot on that because it doesn't scale very well to other things. But one of the things that kind of came out of some of that discussion is that with this new error infrastructure and warning infrastructure that we have, it would be fairly trivial to come up with a way that every error message gets kind of and every error and warning and deprecation and everything else gets that we can assign IDs to them, and that collections would be able to do the same thing because they're already namespaced, right? So if we're able to do that within the next few releases, I think we played around with some little ways to do this and make it work, and I think there are a couple of us that are really passionate about this for all the same reasons. That it's just the deprecation warnings on, off, all, that's the only knob you have, and same thing with regular warnings. There's so much noise that's coming out, and we struggle with this on the core team. This kind of goes back to some of our previous discussions. We struggle with this because there's something that we know is an anti-pattern, but we are sensitive to the warning noise. We don't want to. 2.19 added a lot of warnings for things, and we knew that, and the warnings are noisy, and so it was really apparent that we need to do a better job and we need to figure something out. I think we've got a rough pattern figured out for this that I hope we will be able to deliver in the next couple of releases that will give you that kind of control, but also that as a collection author you can use exactly the same mechanism to issue your own warnings in a way that users can have very granular control to shut off things, whether it's in content or whether just config whatever, but that you will have a lot more control to suppress noisy warnings that you don't care about, so you're not missing out on other important warnings that come up just because right now we only have those couple of knobs.
There's also, especially for collection contributors and maintainers, there's a problem that sometimes finding out about warnings is not so easy, because especially most of the things happening in collections integration tests, and if you're using Ansible test integration to run your integration tests, then all warnings are turned off, so you don't see anything. If there's a warning, you can register a task result and check if there's a warning in there, but it won't be shown in the UI. So, and also there's no way to get a count of the warnings or error deprecation warnings or something that is possible to somehow figure out if suddenly something new turned up. And it's sometimes pretty problematic, because sometimes you only find out about deprecations because some user created an issue for you, and then you're suddenly like, oh yeah, there's a warning, but I've never seen it in the tests because, well, it's not shown there. And that's also not so great, and I hope that this will also get better.
Yeah, that reminds me, there's one other piece to this. So we, as part of that error and warning standardization thing, one of the other things that the facility that got added in 2.19 is error as warning and warning as error. And so part of the design of that little framework that we were talking about, one of the things that you would also be able to do probably with this thing is turn any or all of a particular warning into an error, or vice versa. The error turning into a warning, we're probably not going to allow that for everything, but going the other way, that's been a long requested feature for Ansible Test, because I think Ansible Test, just for noise purposes, tends to turn off deprecation warnings, and that's not great, right? So the other piece of that is that I mentioned this in the Q&A, I think in the Monday's talk, but there is we now actually capture warnings and correlate them to tasks. Those are actually accessible. Like if you're writing integration tests and you need to test a warning, like that's been a really painful experience in the past, right? Like if your content generates warnings and you want to actually be able to look at the warnings during your integration tests, that's really hard to do. You had to do like runme.sh and like grepping for things, and it's always been a mess. All of that stuff, the warnings are actually directly accessible in task results now. So warnings that were generated by your modules, your tasks, those things are directly accessible in your task result. If you register something, or if you're using the new register projection stuff, you can go dig around in there and see all of the warnings that came out of your tasks run. So that makes things for integration testing, warnings, much easier. But the other piece of that is, yeah, the ability to turn any or all or some particular warnings into an error, so that if you have something that you don't know about, that a new warning showed up and is in your testing stuff, that you should be able to turn that on and make it an error, so that that's like your CI starts failing if new warnings start showing up because of a core release. That is one of the things we want to do. So, and Gunnar was giving me the time sign, so I think any closing remarks or.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of more topics. There's still a lot of more topics we could talk about, but yeah, let's maybe do that at some point in the future, or maybe in the break or whatever.
You want to put that on the forum?
Actually, I put a long version of that already on the GIST, and I put a link into the discussion. I don't know if anyone, also on the Bullhorn, I don't know if anyone saw that or read it. It took some time to read it.
Copy it straight into the forum, and then it's easier to reply.
Yeah, it's pretty long, so I'll take a look. Maybe I'll make a short
64K
version.
per post, and you can do multiple replies, so it should be okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'll probably create a new post for that. Or maybe I'll split it up into different posts to make it easier. Otherwise, it's a bit too chaotic, probably. But yeah, I'll do something about that. Cool. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to more comments about some parts.
So we'll take